Hello, welcome everybody. This is going to be a submission video for CAthon. I'm going to be submitting a video with some explanation and commentary for the Castlevania Harmony of Dispel 3-player co-op run. This is going to be a joint submission from me, TurboDog702, Rom Scout, and Mecha Richter. Full disclosure, the video that I'm going to be showing is going to be showing a 2-player co-op run. It is going to be with me and Rom Scout. Unfortunately, due to some scheduling problems and Mecha getting sick for a little bit of time here this week, we weren't able to get as many 3-player runs as I would have liked to out of the gate. But we've definitely worked out like all the strategies we need for the levels. It's just, finding the time for everybody to sit down and put together runs has been a little difficult. As kind of a primer on this, Harmony of Despair is basically an MMO that's almost like a greatest hits of all the Castlevania games, featuring a variety of heroes, a variety of enemies, and maps that are kind of stitched together from bits and pieces of different parts of the series. I've known about this game for a while, but it wasn't until fairly recently, when I came up for the idea for this submission, that I've been heavily grinding the game. So during that time, we had to spend a lot of time kind of gearing me up, and we're still continuing to get like the last few minor pieces of gear for other people inside of our team. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't gotten, again, that 3-player synergy perfectly together for a video. But again, I think this is going to be a great display of what's possible with the run. I'm also going to be showing the maps real quickly that will get impacted by a 3-player run, so we're going to jump into that real quickly. So hopefully you guys can see my cursor. This is Chapter 5. And just to kind of point this out, in Chapter 5, we have a person starting in the number 1 player slot in the bottom left here. Player 2 starts in the bottom right. And most impactfully, Player 3 starts here. And what you can't see is up here and going up this path, there are magnets that the character Shanoa can use in order to quickly ascend the building here. So what happens is the player 3 slot can actually use Shanoa to climb up the outside here, land on top, fall down into this clock area here, hit the switch here, and then proceed to the boss. And the 3rd player slot gets there the fastest. 1st player slot with Soma will be getting there second, or close to the same time. I take a varied path that picks up some healing water that Jonathan can do. Chapter 8. So in Chapter 8, it's a minor change. Player 1, which is going to be Rom Scout, is going to be Soma, and he's going to be wearing the feather gear. He's going to follow me, Player 2, to the left, drop down into this area, pull an enemy in order to do a skip by leading them back through the caverns this way to kind of cause a clip in this area. Player 3 in this case can make that a lot easier for him by going to the right and clearing out this extended climb area that heads down the right side of the map, so he doesn't have to worry about being hit or worry about enemies getting in his way or causing issues, basically. Chapter 11 would be the 3rd major stage where the positioning matters. We've been having kind of a discussion on how we want to tackle this perfectly. Basically, players 1 and 3 start on the left side, player 2 starts on the right, and we have a couple options here. So what we can do is, there's 3 bosses that need to be defeated before you can fight the boss. And those are located kind of spread out. One of them is here on the left side, about 1/3 of the way up the screen, and then about 2/3 of the way up is another boss up here, and the last boss is on the right side over here. And the strategies that we could do is, this player that starts over here is going to pull a switch which opens the gate for this boss. After that, it's possible that both them and one of the other players could go in and defeat this boss together and split from there. Another option would be player 2 can try to solo this boss while the other person begins a climb to this boss over here. So far, the working thing that we've been doing is doubling up at this boss and then moving on from there. I think that's probably a better strategy, but we're still working on that. After that point, the person who defeats this here proceeds on to the boss. The person who needs to defeat this boss up here gets zipped by a player here at the switch, which would be me. So basically, it's a debate whether I just pull both switches or if I help out on Aux. And then both Rom and Mecha would basically be forcing the fight on the last boss, and I'd be holding kind of backup healing water up here. But that's how the third player would impact the run, particularly in these 3 stages. In general, it would also help out because bosses get multiplied health based on the amount of people inside your group. Because my particular character doesn't have nearly the damage output on most bosses that a Soma would have, having a second Soma in the party, even though it would raise the amount of HP for the third player, we would have 2 out of 3 players doing damage rather than 1 out of 2, so just a higher percentage of damage output. But I digress. We're going to go ahead and jump into the run itself here. So this is a recording. It is going to be... I figured I'd do something a little bit different here. So the primary capture here is going to be through ROM Scout. However, I will be shifting over to my local record at times, and this will kind of be an example of what we could do inside of CAthon as far as presenting the game, where we'd have multiple captures, a main screen, and as long as the person has an idea of the general flow, which we could talk them through, or have somebody that's more experienced can talk to the person on the tech crew, we could easily communicate like when to switch to whose viewpoint. And I'm going to be doing that throughout here. Also, I've been doing a small experimentation thing where I'm going to have kind of a picture-in-picture for certain scenes. This could easily be cut out, but in case that's something that's interesting to the tech crew and they think they could do it, I think it could add some extra viewability, for lack of a better term. But let's go ahead and hop right into it. Okay, so at the beginning of this, we're going to be going into Chapter 1. We will be submitting this as both a 1 to 6 and a 1 to 11 chapter run. All of them are played on hard mode. We're going to be capturing ROM Scout here because he has a much easier time getting through this level, and I even take a varied route to assist him at one point here. When you're playing on hard mode, you take significantly more damage, and in this case, both ROM Scout and I in certain places will be wearing an armor called Berserker Mail. Berserker Mail does 1.5 times the damage on all of your moves, but you take increased damage. So you can take maybe 2 or 3 hits from normal enemies, but you die if you get hit by bosses, so it's very important to play well. You notice I split off to the right. That's because this setup for this York jump that Rom does there, we found out kills both of the mermen, so it doesn't really give me a way up afterward, so we modified the strat there. You can see me in the bottom kind of running past there. And at this point, I'm mainly just backup just in case something goes wrong. This is pretty much the ROM show here. Here you're going to get to see that York jumping again. York is essentially a skull which is thrown by Soma, and you can use it to dive kick off of it, and with precise timing, you can ascend to much higher places than you would normally be able to. Much like in other traditional Castlevania Metroid hybrid games, you are blocked most of the time in this game by extra height being added onto things and doors with switches that are needed in order to open them. I do a jump here in order to stay higher above Rom so I can spam shurikens and clear out some of the enemies that drop down. It's usually not a problem, but you know, we just want to minimize the impact of any type of dangerous situation we might have. So this is stage 2. And I've swapped over to my viewpoint here because stage 2 is going to be a little bit crucial that I do it. So we saw York jumping. We're going to see a couple of things here. I have an armor on called Feather Gear, which is going to initiate a clip later on in the level. At the beginning here, I am going to be just basically making my way through the level. The clip in question bypasses an enormous section of this level and allows me to get to a switch that is necessary to be pulled in order to access the boss. So Rom has basically cut a beeline for that door and waiting for me to open it, and you know, in that time I have to kind of make it there. You're going to see what's called a sonic jump here. When Jonathan does a sonic strike close to a ledge, he gets a high amount of velocity that pushes him off the ledge. This is seen also from what's called a corner boost, which is where you dive kick the very edge of a platform, and it gives you a similar momentum gain. Jonathan's is much faster and gains him a lot more distance, and it's a lot easier to guarantee it. While a strict dive kick has to get the corner boost, Sonic Strike makes that much easier. So this is the clip here. And I need that Ice Demon to dive kick me, and sometimes the dive kick also doesn't knock you through. So that is kind of a gambling point at that point, but I don't think we've ever lost more than 40 seconds on it. And then Rom can just completely clean up the boss at this point. Just Vomit Way +1, which is a gear that Soma has, does incredible work. And yeah, just completely bypass the level using that clip. The Ice Demon does need to cooperate a little bit, as I mentioned, but for the most part, again, I think the worst we've ever gotten is like a +40, and it's a very, very strong tool if you do get it to activate much quicker. So for Chapter 3, we swap over to my view again for a very early activation. Chapter 3 is supposed to be a two-stage thing where you need to activate the boss at the center by a ton of platforming and backtracking, but then the stage kind of becomes platforming to attack the boss, who has multiple weak points. However, with a well-timed throw by Jonathan there with the knives, I'm able to activate the boss much, much faster than intended. And that starts him up so that Rom can kind of get into position and prepare to attack him. Good use of what's called the Retro Medusa, which is a soul that allows you to kind of pause yourself in midair at the cost of mana. Allows him to get access to the heart and do tons of damage in that time. Then it's just a matter of using dive kicks to bounce off and gain extra height to attack the knee to finish him off. Again, like, height is a big point that stops people from getting places in this game, so the fact that Soma can dive kick and create his own dive kick platforms with Yorick means that he can bypass a lot of levels and a lot of obstacles in that way. Other characters benefit from baiting enemies in such a way that they can create dive kick platforms where they want to. But again, since Soma has control of that at the beginning, it really dominates the field, and you'll get to see that in this stage. Chapter 4 is very much the Soma show. It's a pretty slam dunk of a stage. There's only one part that can cause hiccups, and unfortunately it does in this point, but it only costs a few seconds. Rom shoots off Gurgoth here in order to clear a path for both me and his compatriot when we would have a third player. It also makes it so that he can use dive kicking, which is a little faster than running, in order to get to places. So, a little bit of trouble there getting to that upper platform as he bonked his head. My main role in this room is basically just to clear so that even if he does take the first hit, he doesn't have to worry about getting comboed out. And he progresses on here. So, as you can see, that elevator is not on, but since he can just dive kick off of the skull he creates, just completely dominates that section. The next fastest strategy, I believe, is like 30 seconds slower or something, and then the next after that is another 40 seconds. So Chapter 5, as I mentioned, for Chapter 5, you could have a third player, and the third player would be able to climb the outside structure and make it to death much, much faster than we'll be able to. But it's still not that much, well, I shouldn't say much, much faster, but they get there with probably about a 7 to 10 second head start on a good climb. We're going to get our first example of a in-frame shot that I mentioned from before, where you could have like a sub-window. I'm going to do that to show off basically an elevator glitch that allows me to get to the top of the platforms and get the healing water at the top of Dracula's structure. That's primarily a backup strat, just in case death goes crazy and ends up killing both of my companions. I at least have one healing water to help out. You can also see here that I use kunai to throw off the imps that are following Rom. Here we have the in-window look that shows me activate the switch and then slide into the elevator as it's closing to get in. Rom continuing to ascend the tower here in the middle using Yorick jumps. It cannot be understated just how powerful Yorick is and how much it allows Soma to just dominate his surroundings. Also, the fact that Soma gets access to Valminway +1, which is basically the most powerful weapon in the game. And he can float using the Medusa soul, really helps out as well. Because as you can see, there's a lot of times where the enemy is going to be off the ground, so you can't just keep jumping up and attacking. That would be quite slow. So it's much, much better if you have access to Medusa Head, where you can just freeze yourself in the air and unload. We're going to have a slight screen in the screen here again. Chapter 6. So, presumably Jonathan could initiate the fight with Dracula much faster and save between 20 seconds and 40 seconds in this. However, the zipping in this game is very inconsistent. And the reason for that is it requires basically pixel-perfect positioning and a frame-perfect jump at the right time. And you might think that that's hard enough, but it turns out that the sonic strike, which is used to zip, also goes an inconsistent amount of distance. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot whenever you're going to get the zip, but there are things you can do to line it up a little bit better that I've been working on. And here you'll actually see me get the first zip very quickly in the bottom left, but then I have trouble in the second zip, and that's where you'll see me kind of flounder and delay. See, nice zip there to get to the second part of the stage. And then from here, it's the same concept. I need to hit that jump again, and unfortunately, I just don't do that until much, much later. As Rob makes his way over to Dracula and gets into the final room at the top, you will see me kind of zip through the last staircase and join him near the very end. I know Mecha Richter has the potential to do a similar skip as well, using Richter. I don't know if he's going to try for that or if he's just going to use a second Soma to assist Rom. Both are good options, I think. Rom using a slight damage boost there to get past the final guard. So you'll probably see it here in about 15 seconds on the bottom right. You might see Jonathan freaking out. But this first phase goes by pretty nicely for Rom. He gets a nice pillar pattern, which allows him to basically just destroy the first form Dracula immediately. And he just unloads on second form and defeats him. During that time, I managed to get the second zip. Unfortunately, at this point, my presence isn't really going to improve damage too much. It'll save a few frames or so. But, very, very strong stage for us, actually. Even without the fact that I didn't manage to skip to the end. Nice little JoJo posing there. The game implements what's called dual crash. If you have enough mana and you're next to a compatriot, you can team up and do special attacks. But yeah, assuming that you could get the Chapter 6 zip, you could save anywhere between 20 to 40 seconds, as I mentioned. It just depends on how quickly you can get there, if the person who gets there can skip, all those good things. Romscout's going to be switching to Soma for Chapter 7. That's because you need to climb a pyramid, and the pyramid has magnets that go up the side of it that make Shinoa just dominate the climb. However, the camera is going to be shifting over to my view for this stage, and that's because I need to reach a certain place that gets opened up by Rom so that I can open up the boss door and start elevators that allow Rom to reach the boss. So we're going to be following me for the first section here. So placing daggers there allows me to get rid of that harpy. I try a strat here that I've been trying out, which is the double jump, and unfortunately it just ate my dive kit input there, which I would have dodged the rock, and that kind of snowballed me into getting slowed down a little bit here. Totally recoverable, though. I even have a super potion in case I was in danger of dying. And during this time, like I said, Rom is just climbing the tower, making his way through to hit a switch. Nice use of the sonic jump here. Throw daggers along the way so I can sonic jump here as well. Had Rom been a little bit quicker, the door would have been open maybe 2 seconds before that, but he got stuck up on something. As he opens the door, I make it through, and the bottom left is a switch which I pull. And again, that activates elevators so that Rom can continue on with the stage. I follow up basically behind him, and I'm going to arrive slightly later than he does. So it's pretty important that Jonathan survives here because Retro Firebomb, which is a weapon I switched in for him, does enormous damage to Astarte, the boss here. Rom Scout really doesn't have an enormous amount of damage against her with Shinoa. So even though Shinoa has a really nice time kind of bypassing the stage hazards early on, you can see that his damage here just isn't really that high. Compare that to the Retro Firebomb, where he's doing 65 a tick. Retro Firebomb is doing 151 a tick, and it hits, 6 times or something each one. Here I get hit by the charm and die, but this is actually a fine strategy that we realized. It's very important that I put out damage here because the amount of damage from Retro Firebombs is so high. But if I decide to get charmed on purpose and then Rom quickly kills me, Astarte will go through an animation where she just sits there and monks you for like 4 or 5 seconds. So if he can kill me and res me, then we have 2 to 4 seconds of just free reign to dump on her. So it's actually a pretty good strat after getting some initial hits to get hit by the charm and finish off. There is a zip you can do in Chapter 7 as Jonathan to bypass from the right side as well and go to the boss, but it's very inconsistent again, and it's much better to just do this strategy since it costs barely any time. Chapter 8, you're going to see another one of the Feather Gear clips that I mentioned before, that we saw in Chapter 2, where the demon dive kicked me through a platform. Similar setup for this one, however, Rom kind of needs to drag the demon a considerable portion further than I did. And you're going to see that here. So he's going to pull this demon, just by having him watch him. The demon will continue to follow him. Meanwhile, I am going further and deeper into the level in order to activate a switch that is needed in order for the boss door to open up. And I'll have a picture-in-picture showing that in the bottom right. So all these enemies that Rom Scout's killing right now are just basically things that Mecha could very easily take out and clear the way for him. Unlike in the previous stage, ice shots can actually clip you in this stage with the right angle, but dive kicks are still the better option. And you see a nice clip there to get him through. After I pull this switch, as Rom Scout kind of goes left along the bottom of the screen, you'll see me pick up a healing water. Once again, it's just to ensure safety throughout the route. In case something terrible happens, I can resurrect someone and they can finish the level. That happens right here on the upper part. Soma pretty heavily dominates this fight. Valman Wei just does a ton of work, and once you access the core of Legion, you can use Retro Medusa Head to float in place and finish off the boss, staying in between the hitboxes on the lasers and flamethrowers. You can see right there. Just absolutely smothers this boss with slashes. So after Chapter 8, we're moving into Chapter 9, which is another Soten-themed stage. This tackled the underground section of Soten. Now we're going to see kind of a castle part of Soten. So at the beginning of this stage, I am going to be throwing knives. Technically, Soma could shoot Gurgoth and finish off these monsters. However, what we found is that since Soma kind of runs this stage, it's better that I use my mana to clear the initial section. And Gurgoth Beam can aggro a Gaibon monster on the far end of the screen, which can cause problems in the final boss fight sometimes. Once again, like, player 2 in general is playing a very supportive role. Soma does so much damage that he really doesn't need particular help from anyone to kill anything in particular. It's just enabling him to shine and doing things that he can't do even as a single player entity. This climb is a little tricky. Each of the brown blocks can actually break if you spend too much time on them, so you do need to move rather quickly and plan well on your jumps. Luckily, we both make it up through the top. There is a backup strategy that you could use in case you messed up the climb and broke too many blocks that Soma could do. Julius can do it as well. And a uppercut character and someone with a dive kick can get up as well. So there's lots of ways that we could take this just in case the climb goes terribly for everyone. But that seems rather unlikely, shall we say. Here I drop down in order to open up the door that Rom's about to hit. You'll see me at the bottom here waiting at that door. So I opened up the door in front of Rom that accesses the boss. He opens the door for me to come up behind him. We also cleared the Gaibons earlier, specifically for the same reason that I mentioned the previous Gaibon. If you leave them alive, they could cause trouble by flying from above into this room. And Berserker Armor, again, makes it so that basically any hit you take is very dangerous and can kill you. So we're moving into the final two chapters. As I mentioned, we're submitting as Chapter 6, 1 to 6, and 1 to 11. We're coming into Chapter 10 here. Chapter 10 is notorious for having a variety of skips inside of it, which is kind of funny. You'll notice that I am switching to Soma, and Romscout is switching over from Valmanway to Muramasa. Dracula has a ton of invincibility frames that make it so that using a blender character with a Valmanway is less effective than using the Muramasa. Also of note, we have been trying to farm Muramasa +1, which could cut this stage down considerably by maybe about a minute in time. So we're going to see a acceleration glitch that Rom is going to try to hit here using the Puppet Master. I am switching over to Soma specifically to spam the man-eating plant ability. And the reason I'm doing that is to create lag. By creating lag, it makes this zip much easier to accomplish. And you'll see it pretty soon here, how wacky these acceleration glitches are. Yep, off he goes. And so that just bypasses this enormously long stage. Now, it should be noted that Rom is still very much in danger at this point. He is wearing Berserker armor. He has the final guard in order to block projectiles that he's worried might hit him. But this is still a very long fight, especially since he has only the Muramasa base and not the +1. You can also see a little bit of slash dash canceling here in order to speed up his attack rate. That's just a matter of slashing, hitting backdash, hitting down, and then hitting slash again. And you can get very, very quick with that. It's not really an issue with Valmanway, since Valmanway just goes, but for other weapons, it's very powerful. The downside for Muramasa itself is that there is a modified technique you can use to not lose ground when you're doing slash dash canceling. But since Muramasa has a special move, you basically would do the special move 9 times out of 10 when you're trying to keep your distance. So you can see Dracula's pinwheel attack covers so much of the screen, and it's a real problem to deal with for most characters. Final Guard kind of trivializes it, which is kind of funny. However, you do need to worry about that charge that Dracula does. That will still one-shot you. And yeah, with 2 character Somas, with Muramasa's +1, this would go much, much faster. But Rom has to play particularly carefully in this case. And he's still going to gain a ton of time on our previous splits, just because at this point he's wearing Berserker armor. On our previous split, he was not. So nice clean kill there. I also killed myself in this stage after I saw him zip. That's a result of just, if we had failed this, killing myself makes it so that when he dies, we end the chapter much faster and can get started again. It's just a concession that I'm not going to be able to contribute anything in the fight. So it's like, I'd just be wasting time if I tried to make it up there. So switching back to Jonathan and Ram on Soma. So this is chapter 11. So we actually run into a kind of a problem here. I mentioned how chapter 11 would change based on 3 characters, just speeding through the sub-bosses quickly. Unfortunately, I end up taking a bad death as I'm trying to clear one of the bosses. And the reason I take that death is because the game actually ate my backdash input. And yeah, I ended up getting killed by Ox. You'll be seeing that in the in-screen on the side as Rom fights his boss. I also wanted the screen to show off another sequence, which is where we use a lever in order to zip Rom to the boss faster. So yet another stage where levers open up doors in order to get to bosses. So that's your main obstacle in this stage rather than height. And in the bottom right, you'll see me just quickly get destroyed by Executioner. And like I said, it's just my backdash got 8 right there. I even double tapped it and it didn't matter. So yeah, it was kind of poor. Meanwhile, Ram is making quick work of Capiclops here. Yes, his name is Decapiclops. Often called the Capiclops. So, nice little corner boost there, by the way, as I was mentioning, how if you kick the corner, you can get a momentum boost that carries over during the length of your jump. So this was an unfortunate death. It probably cost us about 40 seconds, I want to say, maybe 50 seconds. But Rom can quickly come in and finish this up. It's still important that I survive this, because even though this will slow down quite a bit, getting the resurrection allows me to zip Rom after the next boss, which is very relevant. It saves quite a bit of time. And it's just unfortunate that I had taken the death there. Because of that, he needs to come over here, pick up the water, and pull the switch. Usually I would be going over there, pulling the switch, and he'd be at the top at that point. But I get resurrected, and, you just gotta move on at this point. Things sometimes don't go as expected. So unfortunately, you can't pull this lever beforehand to zip other people. We've tried that before. You just end up in the boss room. The other problem is that you need to clear these bosses in order to open the gateway to the final boss. There are zips that can allow you to get into the final boss, but again, consistency is the problem with those type of skips. And there's me zipping Rom using a door. Basically, the door pushes him into the floor, and by facing away, he can control which way he zips. And that allows him to do a bunch of backtracking, going down, going around again, and getting to the elevators. With good luck, you can end up on a good elevator cycle and save even more time as well. So nice little corner boost there from Rom. So Ryukotsuke is probably one of the biggest problems in this run. He is only vulnerable when he punches, and he randomly punches. Like, if he punches twice, you can kill him instantly, but that's more the exception than the rule. I think the worst Ryukotsuke fight we had was 3 minutes in Phase 3. So Phase 1 goes down easily, Phase 2 goes down easily, you just gotta watch for the knife. Phase 3, like I said, we've easily taken 3 minutes on this form below alone. But, we're beyond that, right? Sometimes it happens. So there's the punch I was referring to. Does a lot of damage off of it. That hit that Rom took is actually a strategy he uses. He uses that in order to dodge the Chimeriad attack. At this point, I'm above Rom inside of the sliding section. The reason for that is I can't really contribute too much damage to this fight with my character compared to him, so it's much better for me to just wait there with a healing water in case something goes wrong and he dies. When we actually get to the run proper, since Mecha will be there as well, I'll be wearing a different style of armor, and I will use that in order to survive attacks and keep my healing water, and I'll be clearing projectiles as well. But yeah, that's the 1 to 11 run, and hopefully some ideas on how to present it from a viewer standpoint on the tech crew. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully we get to have it inside of CaliforniaThon. See you guys another time. Thank you for watching.